Let's talk about the major battle that goes on within the trucking industry. I'll show you how it works. Now, most of you guys that have been around for a while will be aware of how this works. This is more aimed at the newer guys, the new company guys. They don't really understand the whole process yet. So let me simplify it for you guys. Basically, there are two major players in the trucking industry. There are the shippers and there are the big trucking companies. And the way this works is the shippers want quality service, but they want it cheap. They want to be able to save as much money as they can. They want to ship as much as possible for as little as possible, and that's what they're all about. But they still want quality shipping. They just don't want to pay very much for it. On the other side, there are the big trucking companies. Now, these guys want to make as much money as possible, particularly if they're publicly traded companies, because they've got shareholders to answer to and CEOs that cost a lot of money. So they want to make as much money as possible. They want to keep the shippers, so they want to save money too. So in trucking, to save money, they're bound by the cost of the regulations, what costs them, the hours of service and stuff. They can't do anything about that. They need to keep their equipment current and new and running properly. Well, they can't really do a whole lot about the cost of that. And they've got the drivers as an expense. And there's where they try to save money. So who's going to suffer here? The driver. And it's so bad these days with the rates so cheap, these guys being so demanding, these guys still trying to make a profit and put as much money in their pockets as possible. Who's going to suffer? The driver. It comes right out of your pocket as drivers. And it's not unusual these days, with this formula being the way it is, that the big trucking companies will actually steal from the drivers. They'll chop the miles, they'll short the miles, they'll short the paychecks, they won't pay waiting time, and it goes on and on and on. And all this is because big trucking companies need to keep the rates cheap to keep the big shippers, and it's a shipper-driven market. There are more trucking companies than there are shippers, so the shippers are in control of the whole deal. They call the ball, they want cheap, and these guys got to solve that problem, and you're their answer. So you're trapped in a terrible triangle here. So how do you solve this problem? How do you get out of this scenario that's hurting everybody in the driver industry these days? And I'll tell you what I've done, and what's working for me is you go to a private fleet, because a private fleet isn't caught in this triangle. A private fleet is shipping their own product. They need to do it efficiently, but they need customer service, and that's what they're all about. So they're willing to pay to have that done. So the private fleets have bitten the bullet here. They've invested in the good equipment. They've invested in the personnel to run the trucks, and they're going to invest in good quality drivers because they've got other problems they need to solve. What they want to do is solve all their shipping problems, have it done properly, and not have to worry about it anymore. So they're going to pay their drivers well, they're going to hire the best drivers, and they do not want turnover. They don't want turnover the way these big trucking companies have. A lot of these private fleets, the companies have had issues with common carriers. That's why they've gone to having their own fleets. That's why they've poured the money and invested the money into their own trucks, is because they don't want to have issues with their shipping. They'll hire the best guys and they're willing to pay them well. And that's how I've gotten out of this vicious circle of not making enough money. The private fleets pay better because they want to keep their guys, and it's that simple. And Pilot Flying J has their own private fleet of tankers and guys. Walmart, huge fleet, their own guys, their own equipment. Pepsi, Coke, both of them, big private fleets. Dean Foods, Tyson, because they just don't want the issues. They want to have the best service possible, and they're willing to pay for it. And these are the types of companies you should be seeking out in this day and age, rather than the publicly traded companies that'll nickel and dime you to death to try to put more money in their pocket. And you nickel and dime 3,000 drivers daily, it adds up to a big chunk of change, and that's how these guys are saving money, and they're saving money on your backs. So don't get caught in this circle. Don't get caught in this trap. And that's my advice for today. And I can tell you, I'm driving for a small private fleet. One of the best moves I ever made. I get paid for everything I do. There's none of this free waiting time, none of this give them the first 2 hours free, none of that crap. They pay me for every minute I'm there. And that's the way it should be for you guys too. This is one way, drivers, to get out of this nasty loop, is to go and work for a private fleet. Now, they won't take new guys necessarily. You've got to earn your way up to that. But for you guys that have been in it for a while, that's one way to get out of this loop. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, I was hauling a lot of hanging meat out of Western Canada and came back into Toronto and stuff. And you get into Northern Ontario and get below Thunder Bay. There are a lot of nasty curves, and the road snakes through the lakes and the trees and stuff. And we were always under pressure to get the meat there into Toronto as quickly as possible because it was fresh meat, it wasn't frozen. So, you know, we weren't wasting any time. They wanted us out of Calgary into Toronto in 36 hours. Back then there were no logbooks. We just, you know, we trucked. And that was about 2,000 miles, a little better, about 2,200 miles, I think. And they wanted us there in 36 hours. And these are 2-lane roads back then. I had lashed into a guy, a fellow I knew actually from Northern Ontario. We got below Thunder Bay and Nipigon. Oh, it was like 1, 2 in the morning. It was dark as heck, and he was in the lead, and we were traveling and trucking and trying to stay awake and trying to make time. So he's in the lead, and we're rolling along. We got hanging beef on, and hanging beef rocks back and forth in the trailer. I'm traveling behind, and I'm watching him go around the corner. We're just below Nipigon, and there's a cliff on one side and a lake on the other. He burns around this corner a little too fast, and the whole back end of the trailer lifts up in the air. I can see the tires on the passenger side come right off the ground. And my heart stops, and I throw on the Jake, and I grab the wheel, and I'm downshifting and hitting the brakes as hard as I can. And in the meantime, I'm watching this trailer in front of me because I'm afraid I'm going to slam into the back of him. I'm afraid he's going over, and I'm going to hit the back of him. I'm looking to see if he slides towards the lake, if I'm going to have an escape route by hugging the cliff on the right side. And man, it woke me up. 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden my heart's pumping, and I'm trying to get out of this situation. The trailer goes up, and it just kind of hangs there in midair for what seemed like a long time. It was probably only maybe 5-6 seconds at the most, and then it sets back down again. And he's okay, and he carries on. He never even says a word about it on the CB. You know, your trailer wheels came right off the ground. Do you know that? He goes, yep, just wanted to see if you were paying attention back there. Man, I was awake for the next 300 miles. I had no trouble staying awake after that. He scared the crap out of me, woke me right up. And part of the reason he'd been able to do that, what he did was he snapped his wheel back and forth to lift the back end of his trailer off the ground. And his reefer was an American reefer. That was the brand name of the trailer, American. And his meat hooks were fixed at points in the ceiling. Mine were on rails. My meat would travel back and forth, so you could adjust the weight a little bit, but his were completely fixed. And he knew that trailer so well, and he had so much control that he'd been experimenting with it, I guess. So he snapped the wheel, lifted the wheels up, and put them back down again. Scared the heck out of me. I wouldn't have tried that in a million years, but hanging beef, especially on a 2-lane curvy road, could be exciting at the best of times. Take care, drivers. It's been good talking to you. It's been good catching up with you again. I'll see you on the backhaul.